In 1973, Jean Pedrick became one of the founding members of Alice James Books, a cooperative press dedicated to publishing poetry primarily by women. The next year, Alice James accepted manuscripts from two new members who both happened to live in New Hampshire.
When summer came, Jean left town, came up to Brentwood. I at the time lived in a town north of where I live now in Barnstead, Center Barnstead, New Hampshire. And I felt sort of bereft. We had been working so hard together. And I think Jean must have simply said, how would you like to just come to my farm? And maybe bring a poem and we could continue talking about our work. And that seems how it began.
When we first got together, it was just the three of us, as I recall. We met outside in the yard and brought some poems to read to each other and critique.
I made these two new friends and realized as spring came that I was about to be a neighbor of theirs because they were both living in Portsmouth. And I said, hey, I'll soon be a neighbor of yours. You have to come over. And they came over and we sat together and read poems, and that was the day we decided this had to be done regularly, and hey, we've been doing it regularly every summer since.
Gradually, the weekly gathering drew more writers. For several, their prior writing workshop experience had taken place in formal academic settings.
I was, for part of the duration of my MFA, the only woman in the program. And on the whole, found the whole thing a pretty depressing experience. Tried very hard to be one of the boys. Couldn't be one of the boys. Didn't really want to be one of the boys. There was no other option. You know, pressed on with being sort of one of the boys until I got the degree. But did stop writing again, and in part I think that may have been because of those workshops and the way in which they discouraged me.
I have one question for you, though, which is, I was in a class where we discussed each other's writing and critiqued it, but it was not so helpful to me. The people seemed to tend to want to be almost mean.
Old ladies jump around a lot. It's all equally vivid, you see. Surely a butterfly would never bother to remember flowers in sequence. You'd read your poem and everyone would dive on it like a pack of jackals and try to dismember it and swallow it whole raw and make an end of you as a poet. I didn't think much of workshops. I thought, well, that's destructive.
So the founders of Skimmilk set out to build a different kind of critical forum. Despite lives filled with commitments to families, careers, everyone who came shared a common goal: to keep writing and improving their craft. So they made Monday morning sacred.
This was one of my winter things.
When I went to the Skimmilk Farm workshop once again, I found a setting in which everyone was encouraged and no one postured.
There is a sense of safety here because of the fact that we know each other. One time over lunch we talked about it, that in old times women used to get together to quilt. We have that same sense of comfort and caring about the whole person as we do about their work.
I never thought of that. I never thought of that. That's wonderful. Yeah.
You work in isolation most of the time, and the opportunity to come here and have it heard, reacted to, sometimes you bring something that you think is really close to being done and discover that it's nowhere near. Other times I'll bring something that I think needs an enormous amount of work, and it turns out that I've probably gotten closer to right than I think I have. But to have that focus on your work, that intense kind of scrutiny and help and criticism, to me is exhilarating.